When I think of the Slumpbuster, I think of unlimited potential. So Slumpbuster episode 64 on 3, guys. I need your best Mr. Unlimited. All right? Episode 64. 3, 2, 1.
Quiet on the set, make sure my mic is on. Eric, Dre, and Juju dog diving towards the pylon. Go for 2, so damn rude, recognize authority. Spitting tips for fantasy, no way you're outscoring me. Bold predictions with conviction every single day. Sports addiction, no restriction, kicking game like Pele. He's the greatest, what's the basis? Pick an athlete, let's debate this game. Outrageous trading places, sudden death, take 10 paces. Turn and shoot, boys the truth, Mamba mentality. Future greats take their place, dreams become reality. Low and outside, knocked it out the park. Your boy discovered fire like a rock with a spark. Refs acting like Neanderthals, phantom flags, nothing calls. Heartbreak losses, tragic falls, every week discuss it all. Settle in, listen up, free your time like Andrew Luck. Show's about to start, I suggest you buckle up.
Mr.
Unlimited.
I was wondering what type of drug Russell Wilson was on when he looked at his video and he said, you know what? This works. Sierra, you want to do some background commentary? You want to get the kids on him? He actually had his whole script written out. He was asking questions to the background audience. Mr. Unlimited. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate that nickname, Kyle?
I mean, it's got to be right at the bottom. I don't know. What's the worst nickname you can think of? Because I know the best one for me is Dustin May. His nickname's Ginger Guard. That's my favorite nickname. I'd say probably a 2 because I feel like that's just part of his personality. He's just not that interesting. And when he hangs out with his friends, it's just a lot of Mr. Unlimited in there. So I guess he's the definition of dull quarterback. He's taken the mantle from Tom Brady for sure.
I think I've heard the comparison that Russell Wilson is if a MacBook computer tried to have a personality. That's essentially the vibe you get from that video, because all his teammates have said it's they can't really get a good read off Russ. He's either the corniest dude ever. If he wasn't playing sports, if he wasn't good at football, this guy would be the dorkiest dude imaginable. It might even be on our level. 3 guys talking on a podcast about how good he is at sports. That level dorky. Yeah. But anyway, guys, let me go ahead and introduce this show. So, of course, your host, Juju Talk Sports. Dre is actually off today's podcast. Join me today is going to be Slumpbuster Bob. You know him, love him. He's back. Then our guest joining us, Mr. Kyle Ledbetter of the Take It Easy podcast. Or are you doing some rebranding? I know I've noticed some switches in your handles there. What's going on currently with the Kyle?
You can still get us Take It Easy podcast with some underscores in there. Our main page, Comical Sports Memes, which you can get some fun content from there. We got YouTube, we've got a blog, we've got all kinds of different stuff going on, but I would follow the Instagram and you can get a lot of the different content.
I'll shamelessly admit that I steal a lot of my memes from this man's page. This guy is hilarious. He has a lot of great content rocking. And naturally,
all creative too. I'm not stealing from anyone else.
Exactly. Completely original meme content. But you know what they say? The best art is one that's stolen. That's my motto, at least. Anyway, guys. All right. So pretty easy show. We're going to be talking about, of course, we're going to be continuing our divisional breakdowns. Today's episode is dedicated to the AFC East. So naturally, I had to bring in the most unbiased Patriots fan I know. Yeah. This man here to my right. If you're listening audio only, doesn't matter what direction he is. But I can assure you, he will not bring any bias into this. This man does not own any Tom Brady paraphernalia, and he does not have a Cam Newton jersey on his Amazon wish list at the moment. But besides that, it's pretty much going to be all football today because we did have some major news this week regarding the collegiate level, the amateur level. So the Big Ten and the Pac-12 have both decided to not play the 2020 season, or at minimum postpone the 2020 season. There was votes between all the presidents of each college. The Pac-12 was a unanimous vote, whereas the Big Ten, there was a couple holdouts. Nebraska is one of the more notable ones. Currently, the conference is still set to play football, this year are going to be the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12. Now, Kyle, do you think it is a mistake, or do you think it's a matter of time before those other three conferences will have to basically adhere to the current narrative?
I feel like those conferences are delaying a lot at this point. I think now that the precedent has been set where major conferences like the Pac-12 and the Big Ten have decided to put their season on hold, you're going to probably see these other conferences follow suit. And the reason that it wouldn't happen is regional politics and the idea of how much football matters not only to those communities and the places we're talking about, but also to the politicians, to the leadership at those schools, where a lot of the presidents can be voted out by board members who are appointed by football programs and football backgrounds, essentially. I think Bear Bryant's son is like the head of the board at Alabama. So there's a lot of power in these situations, but I feel like inevitably these things will end up having to get canceled because it just seems untenable based on everything that's progressed, at least on the collegiate level, where they don't have, say, the infinite resources that the NFL has to distribute $100 tests every single day or every other day. It just doesn't seem viable at this point, and I think give it some time and they will probably follow suit with the Big Ten and the Pac-12.
Now, I agree that certain teams don't have the same resources that you would see at a professional level. However, you did mention Alabama. There are schools around this country that do have those resources. Now, I understand when the Mountain West decides, fuck all, we're not going to be playing football this year. But when it comes to the SEC, a lot of these schools, they're not exactly Ivy League schools. Their claim to fame is college football and college football only. Maybe they'll sneak in a basketball season every now and then if you're like a Kentucky, but for the most part, they make their money in the fall and they know it. The amount of money that these universities are going to sink into testing and making sure that every one of their student athletes is able to compete, I don't doubt is there. Bob, like when you think about the idea of college sports being played in the fall, do you think it is a foregone conclusion that it's going to be canceled? What do you think of the other three remaining conferences? Do you think where all systems go?
You know, just like how I feel about the NFL, I feel very sure in the fact that I don't think college sports are going to happen this season. This year, even, I would be surprised. I hope March Madness can happen, but, you know, it feels like, you know, they don't want to cancel it, obviously, but I see no realistic way that they can make these things happen. And they're just trying to delay it as much as possible, hoping that something changes between now and then. But at the end of the day, if nothing does, then why would it happen, you know?
Now, that's fair. But at the same time, given the resources that these programs are pumping in, if I was to tell you that every one of these student athletes tested negative, would you still hold that like belief? Or do you think that it still can be done?
Well, just knowing how college kids operate in general, you know, I mean, they're having enough trouble having these professional NBA players stay in their very well-structured bubble. I mean, do you really think that you can trust every single college athlete to not go out and...
What are you talking about? Are you saying that 18 to 22-year-old men are not to be trusted? That is a mind-blowing theory. I am shocked by this narrative. Speaking of narratives, though, with the cancellation of college sports, I wanted to get your guys' opinion on another headline that's kind of getting pushed out there. If the media's role in college sports getting canceled this year. So there's been a lot of prominent figures putting it out there. Does sports media hate sports? Now, when you listen to the way that a lot of news anchors or popular pundits on a lot of the major networks such as Fox Sports and ESPN talk, the casual fan has started got the vibe more or less that there's certain people pushing for sports not to be played this year. How much do you buy into that, Kyle, whenever you hear that narrative being pushed?
As someone who has been accused of not wanting sports to resume this season, I take that argument and I just throw it out the window because we all benefit from having sports. There's no incentive for them to root against it. It's just COVID realism is so abundant and every day that people want direct conclusions. And I think specifically when it comes to college football, I think it's not so much the narrative being pushed about COVID, because we're seeing the NBA, the MLB, NHL, and possibly the NFL work out this year. But I think the narrative being pushed around college football is definitely the fact that student athletes are not getting paid, and they are being asked to take risks without much of a concern for their own outlook. Specifically when it relates to college football, there's different arguments here, and the reason I think that the Big Ten and the Pac-12 are done is because of those unionization movements. I'm not 100% sure because everyone has different motives, but it doesn't make any sense, the whole narrative that you don't want sports to resume, because we all benefit from having sports. I know we don't make as much money as some of the guys on big networks, but we still benefit a lot from having actual sports return. So part of it is COVID politics, because COVID has become one of the most politicized issues in America, and people who are realists about the situation end up getting put in distinct political corners.
Well, when you tie that into #WeWantToPlay, tweeted out, of course, by Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, a couple of main prospects coming up in this NFL draft, a lot of people, of course, see that and they get excited. I got excited. I see that. I'm thinking, okay, doesn't matter. Clemson football is taking place. Ohio State's going to figure out some crazy way to somehow still have a season. But the fact of the matter, of course, the conferences, those folks aren't able to do such. When the casual fan sees "We Want to Play," and then you have pundits saying they should not play, how do you think that sits in the minds of those student athletes in particular? Because is it the mainstream popular belief by these athletes, screw it, we just want to get to the NFL as soon as we can to make our money? Or do these guys really want to just be out there for their teammates and for the fact they love football? What do you think of that kind of thought?
The system itself is in a difficult position because, again, if it wasn't painfully obvious that college football is political, the president tweeting about it on Monday makes it painfully obvious to everyone that a lot of this is regional politics. And I think the narrative that you support, whether it's "We Are United" or "We Want to Play," which when it first came out, "We Want to Play" seemed like a direct rebuttal to "We Are United" with what the Big Ten and the Pac-12 and the Mountain West did. With their unionization movements, it feels like it depends what your personal opinion is on whether or not college athletes should be paid. If you're inclined to believe that these kids who aren't taking advantage or able to take advantage of what for a lot of them will be the most valuable period of their lifetime, if you think that it's about amateurism and playing for the love of your teammates and for the love of the sport, you're more inclined to be pro "We Want to Play" movement and listen to the players when they want to play, but not listen to the players when they want to unionize. And if you're pro-unionization and pro-labor, you're probably going to end up on the other side of this conversation. So I think a lot of it plays into the individual in this circumstance, and individual opinions plays a lot into how much you love college football and specifically what region you come from and what team you root for.
Bob, we've actually had this conversation before. What do you think about the NCAA model, and do you think that this is basically a nail in the coffin for it long term?
College students have been demanding change for a while, and I think if you really think that there's no money involved with the athletes at this point, you're kidding yourself. I mean, multiple college athletes have said they've been, basically paid under the table to go to schools, whether it's, the school buying them a car, things like this. So it's already moving that direction. I think people try to pretend that it's not, but it is. And with that coming to life and more who's that college or the high school kid who went straight to G League for NBA? Like you skipped out on.
Yeah. Kyle, do you happen to know that one offhand?
There's a couple of them that are coming up in 2021. I know there's a kid who just got drafted. I think it was like Anthony Simons or something. I know Jalen Green is going to do it next year.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, we have seen a couple of players take alternate routes. I think that for the time being, the NCAA still is, of course, the preferred model just in terms of the amount of publicity you get. Let's face it, for the most part, we're not watching the New Zealand Basketball League. We can watch it via YouTube, and I do think that speaks to the growing outreach and the ability for players to do that because we have more access to them than we've ever had at any other point in history. But generally, in a normal year where we do have a March Madness, that is a big point for players to shine and have an opportunity to increase their draft stock. In fact, when I do think about the no college football thing this year, I think an underrated thing that gets lost in this is there are players that maybe aren't necessarily at the top of most NFL scouts' radars. If you were to look at scouts last year and ask them what they thought of Joe Burrow, he's probably wasn't the number one overall pick. He was probably maybe a mid-third rounder at best, just based off the skill set he had already portrayed. Baker Mayfield the previous year. In fact, a lot of the recent number one picks needed a year of college to actually show what they have. So when you do see also We Want to Play, what did those kids do? Can a Justin Fields transfer? I know it would be a bit of a unique situation that no other player did, but if the SEC is still playing football, Justin Fields back to Georgia, is that a possibility at all?
That one doesn't seem very likely, but I think the more likely scenario is like Nebraska branching off and going to play an SEC schedule. As unlikely as it is, it's still possible. But I think what's going to end up happening is if you have no college football, you're going to only have probably a 4-round NFL draft, a 3 or 4 round draft. NFL draft expert on the show was talking about how it's almost impossible to analyze players based on either freshman tape or high school tape when you're trying to create NFL projections. And so there's this tough situation between the We Want to Play crowd and the We Are United crowd, especially because the top 2% of college athletes get 98% of the media publicity, and then the other 98% who aren't going to have professional careers kind of get mixed in there as well. It's this interesting dynamic that you have between We Want to Play and We Are United, which again always ties back to politics and the politicization of college football. But I think odds are scenario is that if you have a spring season, the Justin Fields, the Trevor Lawrences of the world will opt out, and the people who were sophomores, juniors, who are at risk of losing a year of eligibility will play those seasons if we have it. And then maybe the NFL moves the draft back. We'll see how it plays out. But even if you do that, you're talking about potentially playing like 30 football games in a calendar year for someone who goes to Clemson and plays in a national championship, say in the spring, and then has to come back the next season and play back in the fall.
Or, you could be The Rock and just say, hey, everyone, bought the XFL. Let's just start this league now. Come on, Justin Fields, here's some money. Go for it. That's an idea. Thrown around Twitter. I've seen it. We won't see AP power rankings this year, which will be a bummer. We won't get to see top of the BCS standings, but I will tell you who is at the top of my standings. The number one in men's grooming, manscaped.com. Go ahead and use promo code SLUMP to get 20% off plus free shipping and handling at manscaped.com. And with the money you saved from buying that razor, from looking your best, you could reinvest it. And who I want you to reinvest that is in razorsport.com. That's Razor, R-A-Z-E-R sport.com. They'll tell you where to put that money, who to bet on, get you double money, and then you can buy more great products from Manscaped, such as the Chafeless Boxer Briefs, the fantastic Crop Preserver, ball deodorant. Throw that on there. You smell great all day. Your ladies love it. Anyway, guys, I have a quick message from them, and then we'll be back to talk some AFC East.
This is a message brought to you by the Foundation for a Perfect Package.
Why do I need Manscaped?
Why do I need Manscaped?
Why do I need Manscaped?
Because the only frill I want is the one up top.
Because being in a relationship is not an excuse to be lazy.
Because I like talking ball, not smelling like them.
Because deforestation is proven to prevent forest fires.
Manscaped is the only brand dedicated to below-the-waist grooming.
Manscaped's Crop Preserver guarantees that you smell your best all day long.
Manscaped Boxer Briefs are the most comfortable underwear on the market.
Manscaped's advanced skincare technology makes nicks a thing of the past.
Manscaped is the number one in men's grooming. Subscribers get 2 free blade refills every 3 months. Get 20% off plus free shipping and handling with the promo code SLUMP at manscaped.com. That's the promo code SLUMP at manscaped.com. Get your Lawnmower 3.0 today.
We are the Slumpbusters.
And we approve this message.
I'm LeBron James. No, I'm not. But I'm the king when it comes to sports betting. BetRaiser. RazorSport.com.
Alrighty, guys, we are back once again. Promo code SLUMP, save 20% off plus free shipping and handling at manscaped.com. And then go check out Razor, R-A-Z-E-R, sport.com before you place your next bet. Our next topic discussion, of course, is going to be that AFC East. So we have gone through the North. Now, again, Bobby, this is your time to shine. A lot of pressure on you. You are our AFC East expert for this show. You have seen your team dominate thoroughly this division for the last 20 years. Are you expecting that to change?
No, I've already decided my predictions. I've told you Patriots will be going 16-0, and every other team will somehow manage to go 0-16, despite playing each other.
That is a bold claim, but we won't start from the top of last year's standings. We will actually start from the bottom. And at the bottom of those standings were the Miami Dolphins. They finished last season 5-11. They were the talk of town late in the season. They played tough, gritty football. Brian Flores got this team to play above its level. Actually beat the Patriots in a late game last year with Ryan Fitzpatrick at quarterback. I know that still burns, Bob, but it's not quite miracle in Miami. Anyway, moving on. The Dolphins have done a few things to improve their team. They had Byron Jones at cornerback. They, of course, got Kyle Van Noy from the Patriots. They, and this is the big one, drafted Tua. I'm not going to try his last name. I gave up on that months ago. I'll try it once. Tagovailoa? Am I close? Maybe? Doesn't matter. Anyway, Kyle, Miami Dolphins, what are you expecting from this team this year? Are they going to be what basically has been talked up this year as a new upstart team, the next team to dominate the AFC East?
I mean, if they are, it's not going to be this year. But with the AFC East being where it is at this point, I feel like the Dolphins might just have a shot at the playoffs just kind of by default in this situation because, yes, they paid a lot of free agents. And if you followed kind of the trends in football over the last few years, teams that spend a lot of money on free agents in an off season, those usually pan out in year one. They help you get to like a perfectly mediocre level when you give Byron Jones, Kyle Van Noy, Eric Flowers. They traded for Matt Breida. When you give all of them new contracts and add that in, it helps them in year one. But then like years 2, 3, 4, those contracts come back to bite you. It's why I'm interested to see how things work out for the Jets this year because they paid all those guys an off season ago. But I think that Miami this year could be 4-12 and they could be 8-8. It kind of depends how they fare against the teams in their division. If they win a home game against the Patriots, that's going to help boost their standings. If they can go into New York and get a win, it's going to help them get closer to that 7th playoff spot that I don't really know who's going to get in the AFC because the AFC has like 8 crappy teams and 8 good teams. It's going to be interesting to see. I just want to see if Tua Tagovailoa ends up playing for them like right out the gate or if it's Fitzpatrick. How long do you go to Fitzpatrick? How long does it take for Tua to get ready? I think that's obviously a lot of people are interested in that. And if I had to throw out a fantasy football name for everyone deep in your draft, go find Preston Williams. I'm telling you, go find that dude. He's going to be available at the very end of your draft. Like, low risk and super high reward potentially for the Dolphins. So I don't really have an exact record for you, but I'd say they can be anywhere from 4-12 to 8-8, 9-7 this year. And I've seen one projection that has them getting that 7th playoff spot in the AFC.
Hear that, Bob? With Preston Williams might actually not finish last in our league this year.
Hey, I finished like 10th. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay. My mistake. In a 12-team league, mind you. But as far
14.
as
14 teams.
Oh, that's right. We did add 2 more teams. My mistake, Bob. Big jump
Were
up.
you one of the people that took Alshon Jeffrey in the 4th round? That was my downfall last year.
He's still trying to get over Le'Veon Bell heartbreak from 2 years ago. I think that pain is still running deep. But moving this conversation along, let me ask you about Tua, Bob. How soon do you think we will see him on the field? Generally, the last first-round rookie quarterback to not play a single game his rookie year was Aaron Rodgers, and that was in the mid-2000s. So with that said, Tua, which week if you had to handicap it?
I'm going to say week 6.
Okay.
I feel like it's going to really determine, how long the Fitzmagic lasts this time. So he'll probably start good out the gate and then struggle for a couple games, and then we'll throw him in there.
I think there's worse quarterbacks for a Tua to be behind. Ryan Fitzpatrick, whatever you want to call him. He's a total pro. And yes, he's seen a lot of teams. He's been in a lot of locker rooms. But the man continues to play hard. And I think learning how to play hard, learning how to play tough is great for a young rookie. And, of course, if Tua is still dealing with lingering injuries, whatever that may be, you do have a guy there who can start for you. I have read plenty of reports from his doctors that say he's fine. And when it comes to record prediction, I had this team going 5-11. So same record as last year. Just was looking through their schedule, and I was just having a hard time finding wins for them. If you haven't looked at the schedule, the AFC East is going to be playing the NFC West this year. So you're going to be playing the Niners, you're going to be playing the Seahawks, Cardinals, and Rams. Each one of those are going to be tough games. They're going to be hard to challenge for a young team like that. So I definitely think, though they'll be tough like last year, they'll be competitive again like last year in each of the games they play, I think it's going to be hard for them to really improve that record. Any final thoughts on the Dolphins, guys?
They still have Josh Rosen. Like, is he still on the Dolphins?
I don't know. I didn't even know they still had him.
Because everyone talks about Fitzmagic and Tua, but I feel like Josh Rosen is still just chilling in that QB room.
Yeah, I was hoping that someone would just try and save his career and just trade for him for, like, I don't know, a pack of peanuts at this point.
Well, they wouldn't send him to Belichick. Like, they wouldn't make that deal in the division because they know just how much it's going to hurt them.
At this point, though, just cut the guy. Cut the poor guy loose. He's been drafted by the Arizona Cardinals when they had the worst offensive line in the league, and then traded to the Dolphins, who may have had a worse offensive line in the league, and even traded away Laramie Tunsil, so made that offensive line even worse. So
and he still couldn't beat out Fitzmagic for the starting job.
I think, though, that guy just – Fitzmagic, again, total pro. It doesn't matter what system he's thrown into. He's played in every system at this point. Josh Rosen, throw the guy a bone. Just give him some continuity. Hell, even being in Miami, I guess another year wouldn't be the worst. At least being under the same coaching staff for a year in the pros, so he has an opportunity to learn and relax and settle rather than being shifted around 3 straight years. So could be worse, but his name is kind of getting buried at this point for a guy that was drafted number 9 overall and apparently had 8 mistakes in front of him.
Well, I feel like with COVID, one more thing, with COVID going on, I feel like it's good to just be employed at this point, even if you're on Miami's practice squad.
That is a fair statement. That is absolutely true. With 30 million Americans out of work, Josh Rosen is not one of them. Okay, moving on to Crazy Eyes and the New York Jets. So the New York Jets, their season could be summarized in one word: mononucleosis. And that was caught by their quarterback, Sam Darnold. Sam missed 5 games, and the Jets still actually managed to finish 7-9. They were a competitive team down the stretch. They were not an easy out. They have talented pieces. However, this team, they just traded away their superstar, strong safety, in Jamal Adams. They had free agent acquisition from a year before, C.J. Mosley, their linebacker, opt out. And who is Sam Darnold realistically throwing the ball to? Rashad Perriman, their biggest free agent acquisition of the year. Denzel Mims, who they picked up in the 2nd round this year. It's kind of a weak wide receiving staff, and Adam Gase hasn't been known as a coach to necessarily elevate the talent he has. So, Bob, I'm actually going to start with you here on the Jets' outlook for this year. Do you think that there's any reason to be optimistic in New York, or do you think this could be actually a horrible 3rd year for Sam Darnold up there?
Well, I think this year is going to be the most competitive we've seen the AFC East in 2 decades. That goes without question. That being said, since the Dolphins outperformed what we thought they were going to do at the beginning of last season, and they have potential to be even better this year, I still think the Patriots have potential to be above 500. And obviously the Bills have made a big step forward. Even though I don't think that the Jets are necessarily going to be the worst team in the league, I could still see them, stepping down. Maybe not finishing, was it 7-9 last season?
Yeah, the only one bringing weapons to this team is Quinnen Williams at this point. That's a shot, Quinnen Williams. Don't come after me. Kyle, when it comes to the Jets, how do you feel about their outlook?
I mean, I feel like their outlook for the season became pretty evident when you saw the Jamal Adams trade a few weeks ago. They got an offer they couldn't refuse, and they pulled the trigger on it. They probably won't see a player as good as Jamal Adams in 15 years, which is not really an indictment of the Jets more than it is just how good Jamal Adams actually is at playing safety. If there's something to be optimistic for them, I'd say it's that Gase is probably going to get fired at the end of the year. And after that, you get new GM, new coach, and they might get to pick their own quarterback. That team totally failed Sam Darnold. Like, it's a tough situation for him to be in, but he's already in year 3, and they're like 2 or 3 years away from actually being competitive.
I completely agree with you. They did fail Sam Darnold. And I have said this for years. In fact, I talked about it last week with the Baker Mayfield discussion, was I hate when teams hire their coach just to let him go after a year with the quarterback. So obviously they let Todd Bowles go after his first year there with Sam Darnold. Then they have Adam Gase there for probably just this year. You're right. When you trade away Jamal Adams, it says you're planning for the future. It doesn't say you're planning for the now. And I think you're sending mixed messages with the Jets organization with these moves you're making. You are right, though. With that deal that the Seahawks offered them, you couldn't pass it up. If we're just being honest about evaluating what a safety means to a team, generally it's not 2 first-round picks and a third and a player. I think Jamal Adams is a fantastic safety, and obviously I would have loved to have him in San Francisco. But at that price, at that level, I would have had to walk away. It was one of those offers that, for certain, Pete Carroll, I don't know what they saw, what they needed, but if they felt that was the right move to put them in competition with the Niners, then fine. But I think that was a wrong move for them long term. But in terms of just 2020, because that's what we're looking at, it really hurts the Jets. They have no presence on defense. As I mentioned, the only star talent that comes to mind is Quinnen Williams, and he didn't have a terrible rookie year, but he didn't have the same production that he had his senior season at Alabama. So I do think that that's not very great when you're talking about a top 5 pick. And with that said, you need more than a defensive lineman to steer your entire defense. They have no linebacker with C.J. Mosley gone. They have no presence in their defensive backfield. They have no wide receivers. Their tight ends are subpar. Le'Veon Bell, if he can shine this year somehow, great. But their offensive line is still rebuilding. They added some pieces to improve there. But this was also, again, one of the worst offensive lines in the league last year. So how much can you really improve between 2019 and 2020? With that said, I have the Jets taking a step backwards this year. I have them finishing 4-12. Bob, you want to add a record to it? 7-9 last year.
I'm going to go one below you this time, 3-13.
Go.
I don't know the exact record prediction for them, but I feel like they're going to finish 4th in that division. But they might get some wins just because on paper they're not very good, but they're not that much worse than the Dolphins, and they're not too far gone from the Bills and Patriots, although certainly a tier below them. So they might sneak a few games in there and not have as high a draft pick. I'm interested to see what they do down the road now, because you talked about an anchor for the defense, and they thought CJ Mosley was going to be that, and he's played a total of 3 quarters in 2 seasons and made, I believe, $36 million from that contract already. So I don't know a record prediction on that one, but I would say they're probably going to be somewhere 4th place in that division.
Okay, moving on to the next team in that division. They actually did have some breaking news as of today. So Sean McDermott officially signed a 6-year extension to be the head coach further with the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills have been a franchise that seems to be on the right track. They've turned things around. They have a strong defense. Their quarterback, I'll admit, I was low on Josh Allen when he came out of Wyoming. As someone who's grew up with the Mountain West Conference, haven't seen a lot of talent necessarily come out of that specific conference, especially Wyoming. So to see a quarterback talent that could beat up on more than UNM, I was actually impressed. And he's actually shown flashes of athleticism that I don't think a lot of people anticipated. Their biggest acquisition of the offseason, of course, is going to be Stephon Diggs, who they acquired from the Vikings this year. So they had to give up some draft capital, so they weren't necessarily picking up as many pieces as they would have liked. They did lose a couple players as well, like Shaq Lawson along their defense. But overall, I still think that this team is going to be solid. Maybe they get a bounce-back season from Josh Norman as well. I anticipate them out the gate to be my division winners this year. They just have more continuity. Their defense should still be competitive. I think they're going to keep the ball on the ground this year a little bit more to allow Josh Allen to do more things with his legs, with his athleticism, not necessarily go all Baltimore with it, but we did see flashes of it with the playoff game last year that, hell, they were even sending Josh Allen to run routes. I like the Bills this year. I really do. Out the gate, I'll admit my prediction for them. I had them going 10-6, which isn't a fantastic record for most division winners, but it's enough to get number one in the AFC East. Kyle, you want to start this one off?
Yeah, I would have to say that one of my boldest statements out there for the season is that I just don't see how the Buffalo Bills are going to be that good unless they win the division by default, because they go 5-1 against the Jets, Dolphins, and Patriots. Like that's a real possibility, but I just don't think they're going to be as good as they were last year. First of all, they had the number 2 defense in the league last year, according to Pro Football Focus. And defense is super volatile in the NFL. We've seen it regressions year after year after year when you talk about the Bears, the Eagles, the Jaguars, the Vikings, the Seahawks. Like year after year, defense isn't necessarily consistent. And yes, they bring Josh Norman in on defense. Yes, they'll have a fully healthy Ed Oliver, unlike last year. And yes, Tre'Davious White doesn't opt out of the season. But counting on them to have another top 3 defense when there are a lot of good defenses in the NFL this year is, I feel like, a bit of a stretch and something that a lot of people are putting stock in when they make predictions about the Buffalo Bills potentially winning like 12 or 13 games this year, and having them be like legitimately elite. I would reserve that more for a team like the Colts.
I think a little bit of that is faith in the coach, though, because McDermott has been a consistent guy. His one bad decision, of course, was that one week he decided to bench Tyrod Taylor in favor of, oh, God, I can't even remember his name.
Peterman. The Peterman.
There we go. The GOAT. How could I forget the name of the GOAT, Nathan Peterman?
As a meme expert, that guy is a god for me. The legend of Nathan Peterman shall exist forever. But you brought up a good point right there with McDermott, and more so than people have faith in the coach, I feel like people have faith in the quarterback. And I don't see why, because yes, people like making the Lamar Jackson comparisons, but Josh Allen had the lowest completion percentage, not just last year among starting quarterbacks, but over the last 4 seasons among starting quarterbacks. And we see the difference now between having an accurate quarterback and an inaccurate quarterback. Jameis Winston threw as many passing yards as Matt Ryan last year. And the issue with Jameis Winston is that he completes like 15% less passes than Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan is a guy Falcons fans argue is a Hall of Famer. Jameis Winston's a third stringer on the Saints. So no matter what, Josh Allen's going to have to improve the accuracy, regardless of how good he can run the ball or how athletic he is or how far he can throw a football. I just don't think he's going to do it. And I think that come 2021, Buffalo's going to disappoint and they'll be in that quarterback market potentially for a Dak Prescott or another rookie quarterback, whatever it'll end up being. And that's going to be their problem.
What about you, Bob? How do you feel about Josh Allen? Do you think he is a quarterback that the Buffalo Bills can count on long term?
I do. I see the Bills going 11-5 this year. You know, I think they have a lot of talent, you know, with the Patriots sort of taking a step back from having the throne this year. You know, you said Lamar Jackson comparison. I was hearing some more like Cam Newton-like comparisons, but
physical.
Yeah, no, I believe in the Bills as much as I hate them.
Well, you know, you would hope that that fan base definitely believes in their team. They will dive through a table that is lit on fire and covered in barbed wire for this team.
Well dressed as Santa Claus.
Bills Mafia is by far and away, as a Niners fan, I will admit this, my favorite fan base. I am not going to lie. It is so odd, the rules and customs that are allowed in the streets of Bill's Mafia. Bill's Mafia is the only place where it is okay to slam your wife through a table. That is the craziest thing about that franchise.
Throwing dildos onto the field.
And throwing dildos onto the field and other sex paraphernalia. This franchise is wild. The only difference between them and Philly fans is they don't just riot for everything. They're actually a pretty chill, crazy fan base. They're self-contained. They keep it in the tailgate lot. They know what they're doing.
They haven't had much to celebrate either.
Yeah, I don't know if you folks have seen, of course, the East 60 documentary, Four Rivers. Highly recommend it. It is a tough watch. It details all four of those Super Bowl losses consecutively. Highly recommend it. E60 always does a good job. And just empathy. If you are empath, that's why they're so driven to madness. That's what makes Bill's Mafia that. If you saw your team lose 4 straight Super Bowls, are you telling me you wouldn't jump through a table? You wouldn't want to jump out the nearest window you saw? That is.
What else are you going to do in Buffalo either? They don't have much else other than the Bills and the Sabres, and the Sabres are never good.
Play around in the snow, visit Toronto. That's pretty much it. You can use it as an opportunity to escape the country. That is the life of Bills fans. But at the same time, we believe in you this year. Buffalo, I have you winning the AFC East, going 10-6. Slumpbuster Bob, 11-5. Kyle, you want to throw a record on it, this one?
I don't have a record just because, again, they can go 5-1 against the AFC East and win the division. But, I mean, I look at them, I'm like, that's a 7-win team. But they play in a division that's not very good. So they might just magically get their way or luck their way into 10 wins this year. But roster-wise, I feel like they're a 7-9 team.
The Patriots managed to work that 5-1 against the AFC East for years. So it is a winning formula. And speaking of those Patriots, so they are missing one core piece this year. I can't put my finger on it. What is that, Bob? Can you help me?
Well,
Dante Hightower.
Dante Hightower, duh. Also, Patrick Chung, those are big losses. There hasn't been any other offseason news with the Patriots, has there?
We didn't re-sign Antonio Brown.
Oh, okay.
Josh Gordon's still gone.
You drafted that kicker, right, in the 3rd round?
We did.
You did that down. Yeah, new kicker. So Stephen Gronkowski. Oh yeah, and Tom Brady's no longer a Patriot.
Yeah.
That's what. How could that escape my mind? It's almost like people should have covered that. That was a different time. It was pre-COVID. Everything after Tom Brady signed with the Bucs was just a downhill spiral.
Thanks a lot, Tom. Look what you did.
And then he's the one out there breaking Tampa Bay restrictions. He's going into parks without a face mask, breaking into people's houses. What was Bill Belichick doing to control this man for 20 years? That is the major question that we have to answer. As well as the record predictions, we'll focus on the team. But this is such a unique year. This is something we haven't seen. So just to summarize again, everything with the Patriots. So we did mention they did have several opt-outs, and they were the team that was probably hit the hardest by opt-outs. Dante Hightower, Patrick Chung, these are core pieces of that defense. And then obviously you're losing the GOAT, the real GOAT, not Nathan Peterman GOAT, but Tom Brady. And we haven't seen much of that. We saw 2 games of Jimmy G, one of Jacoby Brissett. We got to see Matt Castle for a year. But for the most part, it's been Tom Brady running the show. So do you want to give a farewell letter to Tom on this one?
Well, I've written a farewell letter to Tom. But if I remember correctly, that season with Matt Castle, we did finish.
Don't even remember his name. Matt Castle.
Same thing.
Okay.
We did end up finishing 9-7, correct? We still
11-5 actually. 11-5. It was one of the most unique
we
seasons.
didn't make the playoffs.
Didn't make the playoffs. It was one of the more unique seasons in NFL history that 11-5 team did not make the playoffs. In fact, a really good Cleveland Browns team didn't even make the playoffs that year.
And the thing is, obviously, you're talking about Adam Gase not having a record for elevating talent, but Bill Belichick is obviously the complete opposite. You know, I think obviously we've lost a lot of key pieces, but I think we're still the best run organization in football. We have the best coach in football. Cam Newton hasn't shined like he did in that 2015 season. I see the Patriots still being above 500, but I'm going to put them at 9-7.
9-7. Okay, and I think that is an optimistic projection. But let's expand on Cam Newton. So, Kyle, I'm going to throw this to you. So, Cam, we haven't seen good Cam in a while. Certainly, we haven't seen it since mid-2018 when the Panthers started off pretty hot out the gate, and then a pivotal sack by TJ Watt seemed to derail their entire year. Cam Newton obviously suffers a shoulder injury. The next year, he's dealing with, I believe, a mix of foot injuries as well. And it's been a while since we've just seen prime Cam, even going back to the year after the Super Bowl where he played the Broncos on that opening night game and it got roughed up a little bit. So what can we expect from Cam this year? Are we going to see MVP Super Cam?
That's the big question, isn't it, Julian? Like, there's this dynamic right now where I don't know, and I don't think anyone knows how the Patriots plan to use Cam Newton. Whether they want him to be Superman from 2015 and have him run for 1,000 yards in a season, whether that's even possible anymore, given his history of injuries now and, reconstructive shoulder surgery, Lisfranc foot surgery. I just don't know how the Patriots are going to use Cam Newton. And that's why I've been saying, even before they signed Cam Newton, when Belichick had us convinced that Jarrett Stidham was an actual NFL quarterback, that they might be 4-12 and they might be 12-4. I just have no idea how it's going to work out. The defense is another problem because, Belichick's been able to replace a lot of talent in the past. I just don't know if he's ever had to replace this much talent in such a short period of time, plus the whole COVID situation. But it's tough to figure out how good they're going to be, and a lot of people are putting stock in Belichick because they don't have a lot of other answers.
Yeah, the interesting thought about that, and I'm a Belichick believer. I will say that. How he's been able to replace talent over the years has been a very big point of why he's considered the greatest all-time coach. But the big difference is Bill breaks up with you. You don't break up with Bill. Tom leaving him and all these players leaving due to the COVID is something that hasn't happened to Bill. He hasn't had players walk out on him in a mass exodus like this. Rob Gronkowski leaving him a couple of years ago. Danny Amendola, we have seen just a downward trend of players no longer wanting to play for Bill Belichick. And we actually had this discussion on our most recent pod. Definitely go check it out. But whether or not today's athletes can be coached up the same way. We know that Bill Belichick, he believes in tough love. That's his style of coaching. And I know, as a former athlete myself in high school, that's how my coach was. Bob, I don't know, like in any sports you played, if you had a tough love head coach. Kyle, same question. But a lot of coaches just grew up with the same type of mentality. I'm going to treat my best player like he's the worst player. I'm going to treat a man with 6 Super Bowl rings like he was still a pick 199. And that's a turnoff for a lot of people. That's hard to absorb to your ego. We all have egos. In fact, and with that said, Bill, at this point, I think he has as big an ego as anyone. And it's a curious case study. Are we going to see the Bill Belichick we saw with the Cleveland Browns at that franchise's turning point when they then became the Baltimore Ravens? Or are we going to see Bill, who managed to put together, again, an 11-5 season in a year where Tom Brady tore his ACL? Are we going to see a Bill that managed to piece together the start of the year where Tom was out with the Deflategate incident? That's when Bill's been at his best. He's had to replace coaches year after year after year. And I think the biggest thing of strength you can say for Bill is going to be the continuity. The New England way, the Patriot way, do your job, has been instilled in so many of those players from the point when they were drafted that I think that is going to be able to keep this team at bare minimum competitive. You won't see this team blown out by 45 in any game this year. You won't see them just absolutely tanked. They're going to be in games. They're going to maybe lose a few one-score games. But what does that leave with the Patriots? I have them going 8-8 this year. And that's just because of the enigma, the working parts, the lack of talent. It's not a very talented roster. But I think between the scheme fits and the coach, I have to give them the benefit of the doubt to at least put together an 8-8 season. Anyone else? Anyone want to take it up from here?
Well, I already gave mine, so.
All right.
Oh, that's right. That the miraculous 16-0 with 0-16 mixed in there. Like I said before, it's going to be either like 4-12 or 12-4. Like they might catch some of those Seahawks breaks from last year, where I think the Seahawks were like 9-1 in one-score games, and like kind of the narrative has been, they might luck their way into 5-1 against the Dolphins, Jets, and Bills. Like it's why the AFC East has been so hard to predict, but also why I have no faith in any of those teams to make it past the first round of the wild card weekend.
I'll speak for MMA Dre. He always talks about the big brother syndrome, and that's essentially what the Patriots have had over this division for years. If it happens again, more credit to them. You know, big brother just having to pick on little bro a few more times, but I think this is a very turning point moment. I think the Bills finally hit their growth spurt. All right, well, let's close out the show strong. Kyle, there is a question we always ask our guests here, and I have to get yours. What is your favorite all-time sports movie?
I mean, I've got a lot of good ones, but unquestioned, undoubtable, number one, Rudy.
Okay, nice. So you're our third Rudy. We've had Remember the Titans a ton on this show. We've had a few oddball ones thrown in, but Rudy. I'm with it. Rudiger gets some representation. It should be a widely known fact, but oddly still little known. It was based off a true story. So go look up the real guy. Interesting story. Joe Montana actually was on that Notre Dame team. Worthy note. All right. Take It Easy podcast. I know you plugged it a little bit at the start, but feel free. Shameless plugs. Go for it.
I mean, you guys should definitely check it out. We do episodes every day. Sundays are special Wired Up episodes, which is a different format than the usual one. This episode's going to be in there tomorrow. We're also going to talk about the Cardinals a little bit tomorrow. Episodes released every day. We're doing different stuff. Comical sports memes, Take It Easy podcast, both of those Instagrams, blog, YouTube. If you find us on Instagram, you can kind of find the hub for all the different stuff that I'm doing, and friends like Juju over here are also doing here with the Take It Easy podcast.
All right, guys. Well, you know where to find us if you're listening, but don't just listen. Hit that subscribe button. Give us a rating. Leave a review. Use promo code SLUMP at manscaped.com. Follow Slumpbuster Bob. Check him out. Post some good stuff, too. At Slumpbuster Podcast on IG. At Slumpbuster Pod on Twitter. Go ahead. Check us out on all major streaming platforms. And, of course, the main thing, I want you all to stay safe, happy, and healthy. And we'll see you next week.